Hello and welcome to the Corporate Facility Council's first Wednesday webinar, the Post-Pandemic Workforce Designing for Age Diversity, presented by Erik, Lucken, Strategy Director, AI Interior Architects. Everyone has been muted for audio quality. If you have any questions at any time during the webinar, please feel free and type them into the question box, and we will go over them during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. I do also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Corporate Facilities website, ifmacfc.org. I want to go ahead and introduce our presenter. Erik Lucken is a 25-year veteran of the design industry. He's a workplace strategist based in Minneapolis office of IA Interior Architects. For the last decade, Erik has extensively studied the intersection of business performance and the workplace environment, focused on the design imperative to support both how and why people work today. Leveraging both quantitative and qualitative research, Lucken has published insights on critical workplace drivers such as mobility, well-being, and workforce demographics. At this time, I'm happy to turn it over to Erik. Erik, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me join you today. I'm going to be talking to you about the future workforce and possibilities for design and strategy to create a workplace that's really kind of welcoming for workers of all ages. My talk is divided into 5 sections, each taking on this topic from a slightly different perspective. First, we're going to be looking at kind of a demographic transformation happening right now with our workforce. I'm going to give some background on why this has happened. We'll be looking at benefits of age diversity in the workplace. We'll do a little bit of myth busting on generational stereotypes. And lastly, going over some design implications and really possibilities. But first, I just want to step back a little bit for context. Again, as Joshua said, I'm a strategy director with IA Interior Architects, and my role on projects is really about uncovering opportunities to think about the workplace differently, looking at new ways it can support people so that it can, again, truly contribute to business performance. The emergence of workplace strategists as a role, I think, is in part because of the rate of change today. No workplace project happens in a vacuum, so we have to approach them with an understanding of kind of the broader context of what's happening in the world, in business and technology, in politics, societal changes, industry changes. So I should say at this point that, and hopefully this is a treat, at no time in this presentation do I use the term hybrid worker or work from home. I know that seems to be almost the only thing people are talking about right now in relation to the workplace. But one of my worries is that by focusing so much on that, we're losing sight of a lot of other things about work that are changing, that are frankly more impactful for the future. So what you're seeing on this slide here are a few of the things I've been focusing on with my clients. Certainly automation, as we speak, it is altering work in really fundamental ways. It's poised to not just do away with a lot of jobs and create new jobs, but even the jobs that remain will change. So much of our time is spent doing things that aren't really value adds, trying to schedule meetings or looking for files, sorting through emails, all things that a computer could do better. So relieved of those tasks, the skill sets in demand are going to be around creativity and communication, collaboration, and those are all going to change how the workplace, what it needs to do to support people. Also, a focus on disruption. No industry right now is really safe from new competitors. Even disruptors are being disrupted, which in turn is driving a whole new era of elevating kind of the innovation imperative. This idea of don't wait to be disrupted, disrupt from within. The last driver, though, here, the one I'm going to be talking to you about today, is workforce change. Workplaces exist pretty much exclusively to support the people who work within them. So it's really critical to understand any changes happening with the workforce, which is really kind of how I came upon this topic of age diversity. So for a long time now, the idea of workforce change has been focused on one group, Millennials. They're coming. You can't ignore them. They'll change everything. Starting about 10 years ago, every day my Google alerts filled with articles about Millennials, so many that it almost kind of got ridiculous. And I started wondering, is this normal? Every time a new generation enters the workforce, does everybody just kind of go nuts? So I did some research, and no, it's not normal. I found a few articles about Gen X's advent into the workforce, but nothing even approaching the scale of attention that millennials got. So why? Why so much attention on millennials? Part of it, I think, is that they're the first generation to enter the workforce with really a robust internet in place. So, you have websites and webinars and blogs and all matter of thought leadership platforms. They have to be filled. And this topic is just, it's good at drawing traffic. So there's that. But what I really think the attention stems from is a statistic, a factoid that showed up, that still shows up, about millennial size in the workforce. The factoid, it kind of states that by 2025, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce. That would give good cause for all this attention. The idea that nearly 8 out of 10 workers would be from one generation, that's pretty huge. We better understand what that generation wants at work. Even the giant baby boomer generation, they never got close to 75%. But you have to unpack this a little bit. If millennials will be 75% of the workforce in 2025, that leaves the other 4 generations at work sharing that remaining 25%. So Gen X today is about 33% of the workforce. They'll be nowhere near retirement in 2025. And boomers, they're a little less than 25% of the workforce today. There are some retiring, but in 2025, there'll still be an entire cohort of boomers who are 5 years away from retirement age. And Gen Z, they're in single-digit percentages of the workforce today, but they are pouring in by millions every year. Their percentages are on the rise, and yet somehow millennials, which make up 35% of the workforce today, will somehow double that percentage in 4 years. And keep in mind, there hasn't been a new millennial born in the United States since 1996. So if all that sounds kind of impossible, it's because it really is. Short of some kind of very specific zombie apocalypse that takes out everyone except millennials, no generation could ever hit a workforce percentage that high. It's really kind of a demographic impossibility. So just want to put this one to rest. And again, I think this is important because the stat keeps showing up. But in 2025, we know with a fair degree of certainty that the workforce is going to be 167 million people. That we're really good at predicting this after this much time. To be 75% of 167 million, there'd have to be 125 millennials in the workforce, 125 million millennials in the workforce, sorry. The entire population of millennials in 2025, and remember, there are no more being born. There's some growth from immigration, but not a lot. That'll be approximately 74 million. So even if every single millennial was in the workforce, they'd never be 75%, not even close. So if you Google that stat, you'll still see it everywhere. You'll see it in really respectable publications, in annual reports of major corporations, but it's not true. So just to kind of look at what it will look like in 2025, and I have to say that the Bureau of Labor Statistics makes it really difficult to do generational analysis because they don't actually recognize any generation except for baby boomers. That is the only official generation recognized by our government. So kind of after digging through a bunch of population tables, my math gets millennials to about 45% of the workforce in 2025, and that will be the highest they'll ever attain. So 45% is nothing to sneeze at. But it's not really newsworthy either. It follows a very typical demographic pattern, So, not a big deal. We fixated on millennials for a really long time. It wouldn't be a big deal except that it really kept our attention from something much bigger that's happening, something that really is unique, something that is newsworthy, something that is transformative. While all our attention has been focused on the incoming generations at work, much more interesting things have been happening at the other end of the age spectrum. Now, these stats are pulled directly from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, looking at the percentage change in workforce share from 2016 projected to 2026. The fastest growing group of workers in the US workforce is people over 75, a 90% increase, 50% increase for people 65 to 75, 5% for workers 55 to 65. Now, granted, those percentage increases, there's a start with smaller age groups to start with in terms of making that leap. But when you see these kinds of growth numbers, they do eventually lead to notable change, and they have with our workforce. Workers age 55 have gone from always being the smallest percentage of the workforce to the largest. This is a first in US history. So having 5 generations in the workforce, that's really not a new thing, but having such large percentage representation across generations really is. And for anyone thinking this is just an anomaly, you know, that normal patterns will reappear after the, you know, the big baby boomer generations fully depart the workforce, that is not the case. The figure on the left here is a age pyramid. It's a classic way of showing population. Men are on the left, women on the right. Each horizontal bar represents 5 years starting at birth and going up to the top bar, which is a catch-all for people aged 85 plus. Each bar extends out representing a percentage share of the population. Throughout human history, whenever you've looked at the population this way, it makes a pyramid. Each 5-year segment, you know, has a certain degree of loss, so the bar narrows slightly each year, resulting in that pyramidal shape. And you see on the left in 1960 that indentation for people aged 20 to 30. Well, you know, you think what happened 20 to 30 years before 1960, the Great Depression. People have fewer children during recessions and depression, and it turns out also during pandemics, which I'll touch on later. So fast forward to 2018, and that pyramid shape, you see it's becoming something very different. And then jump again to 2060, and that pyramid is gone. It's a pillar. In less than a century, population patterns that have existed for millennia have completely altered. And there are 2 things I want to point out on this slide before I move on. The first is that in 2034, the US will experience what is called a crossing. That is a moment when there will be more people over age 65 than people 18 and under. That has huge implications for the workforce. The second thing to point out is that looking at 2060, that top bar, that's that catch-all for people age 85 plus. You see that it is bigger than the bars under it. That's another first. Our population is, you know, historically speaking, aging very quickly, and the workforce is aging right along with it. And I do want to point out that, you know, while my focus of this presentation really is kind of around the United States, this pattern is not just a US thing. It's very much a global phenomenon. It's happening all over the world. People are living longer across both developed and developing nations. And we're just seeing the population over 65 increasing, you know, in some cases quite a lot in any number of countries. You know, the US is not even leading in this. So this is something very much of applicable to global nations. So I want to talk a little bit now about why this happened, because the factors I think are really key to understanding why an age diverse workforce is here to stay, and why in the future it might not just be 5 generations at work, but possibly 6 or even 7 generations. So one critical factor is you know, our birth rate. It's been declining for decades. It is well below the rate needed to even maintain population size. The 2020 numbers have just been released, and there was a not unexpected a 4% decline in 2020, leading us to the lowest birth rate in U.S. history. After 60 years of continued lowest birth rates. So there's certainly a degree of that is tied to the pandemic, but it's again, it's continuing a decades-long decline. And it interestingly, it worsened after the 2008 recession, which it did in the Great Depression as well. And it remained low even after the economy recovered. So there's concern around, you know, what's going on here. You know, fewer births simply mean fewer younger people entering the workforce. So there are enormous implications. On the other side of that, on the right here is another reason for the increase is life expectancy. People are living longer, they're staying healthy longer, allowing them to work longer. In 2020, you know, there was a decline in life expectancy. That's not surprising with the pandemic, but unlike the birth rate, that number is really expected to return to pre-pandemic levels very, very quickly. You know, what's interesting here is where does you see that increasing line? You know, where does life expectancy top out? No one's sure. There are a lot of different schools of thought on that, but there does seem to be scientific consensus that 100 years will become a very typical lifespan. So if we follow the kind of the historical rate of increase in life expectancy, the average person, oops, apologies, the average person, I got a little ahead of myself. The average person should expect to live to be 100 years old around 2080. Again, that's average life expectancy. But as kind of evidenced by the medical breakthroughs we've seen with the COVID vaccine, there's certainly fair reason to believe we might actually make this milestone earlier. And already today, you know, a healthy 30-year-old woman has a 60% chance of living to 90, 50% for a healthy 30-year-old man. So this kind of longevity will continue this kind of workforce demographic trend we've been looking at. Another factor in the increase in mature workers in the workforce is that we've seen the nature of jobs change. In 1960, about half of all jobs involved some kind of physical labor, whether they were manufacturing or agriculture. We've now transformed overwhelmingly to a service economy, and those types of jobs are simply more accommodating of people of all ages. So physical labor may have been a barrier holding down workforce participation for mature workers at one time. That's simply not the case anymore. Now, there is a downside on this one. This shift to non-physical labor in nearly all jobs has not been great for the health of the average worker. Look at that chart on the right, because I'm gonna make a little mental note of it. I'm gonna be mentioning it again. There's also been a revolution in attitudes about working past retirement age. In 1996, when Gallup polled people about their intentions at retirement age, 86% said they planned to retire. That same question in 2017 got almost an inverse response, with 74% of people saying they plan to keep working, at least in some fashion, upon hitting retirement age. The intent to continue to work, it even goes higher if you look just at baby boomers. So why this desire to continue? A study of boomers working past 65 found 60% were doing it because they wanted to keep contributing, to have purpose, to be part of something, to feel needed. And and this is the last point in this section, but another reason for the uptick in people working past retirement ages, some are doing it out of necessity. Americans have not been great at saving for retirement. The chart you see here on the left shows median retirement savings across age groups. So you think about that life expectancy chart I showed, even augmented by Social Security, none of these dollar amounts are enough to really fund 20 to 30 years of retirement. And the chart is somewhat misleading because it really only reports on households that have retirement savings. About 50% of American households have none. We did see an increase in saving in 2020, which is promising, but that trend staying around, there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical. So, in rounding out this section, this combination of fewer births, longer, healthier lives, more jobs that accommodate mature workers, a strong desire to continue to work, and for some, the necessity to work. These are all factors that have led to this kind of incredible labor force participation increase for people over 55. Now I want to look at why that's overall a very good thing. Innovation is one point where there really isn't any kind of counter argument. Years of research in all manner of economic and social sciences have shown that diverse teams are simply more innovative. And on the right, according to a Randstad study from 2018, 90% of people prefer working on age-diverse teams. 87% believe age-diverse teams deliver better results. And kind of no surprise considering the rapid increase in age diversity, 85% of people in the study report they already work on multi-generational teams. So, in this age of, again, as I talked about earlier, disruption, intense competition, that innovation imperative for new ideas, better results, these are all key factors that are going to impact organizational survival from here on out. So this slide, in terms of what age diversity can deliver, is one that's really important to keep in mind. People staying in the workforce longer is also going to be really critical for the health of our economy. Economic growth is in part tied to labor force growth, especially skilled labor. And we're facing a situation where 10,000 baby boomers, they turn 65 every day and will through 2030. It actually even gets higher around 2030, about 12,000 a day turn 65. So this represents the potential for just enormous brain drain. We're just looking at a massive talent war on the near horizon, and not just within the US, but between global nations, all who are facing this aging population situation. Automation, which I talked about earlier, is going to actually exacerbate the talent shortage problems, with this transition to jobs, with more jobs requiring skills like creativity, critical thinking, decision-making, communication. The educated, trained people with those skills are in short supply. So, the talent war has never been about just sheer number of workers. It's about workers with the right skills. So enticing workers with those skills to stick around longer in the workforce is potentially a really critical factor in terms of maintaining economic strength. There's also Social Security to consider. The Social Security Act, just to give a little history, was signed into law in 1935, and retirement age was set at 65. which was actually a few years more than the average life expectancy at the time. So Social Security was not designed to fund 20 to 30-year retirements. They, as it was set up, they just didn't foresee the demographic changes we've been discussing today. When the first Social Security check was paid out in 1940, there were about 42 working age people paying into the fund for every one retiree drawing benefits out. In 2030, that ratio is projected to be about 2 people paying in for every 1 person drawing out, and that is simply not sustainable. So as things stand, the number of retirees, it's poised to really strain, public budgets, slow economic growth, and it just has some pretty dark implications for the living standards of people of all ages. So people working longer, paying into the fund longer, delaying drawing money out, that really benefits everyone. And while these previous points have really kind of focused on what we all, companies and society, have to gain from people working past retirement, there's gain for them as well. The research on the impact of working longer is pretty conclusive in showing it benefits physical and mental health, staying active, feeling needed, having purpose, as well as, of course, financial health. Obviously working longer means continuing to draw a paycheck. And on top of that, the federal government does offer some pretty healthy incentives for working past retirement age. Even if it's just a few months, you get to draw out significantly more in benefits. So people working longer, it really does. It helps to deliver better business performance, more innovation. It boosts our labor force and our economy. It eases that dependency ratio, delivers health and financial security for the people who do it. It's such a long list of pros. In a sense, organizations shouldn't just accept people working longer. They should probably be actively courting them to do so, which is what we're going to look at now. So really the first step in terms of embracing age diversity in the workforce and in the workplace is shedding some of the unhelpful stereotypes for all ages. So I'm going to go through a few generational myths, including some really interesting ones around workplace preference. So starting here, there's this idea that the only way to get tech-savvy talent is hiring young. The Educational Testing Service, and that the ETS it's a group, they conduct the GRE and the SAT, so kind of the gold standard in aptitude testing. They did a study looking at adult aptitude in relation to job skills, and in the report they admit what they expected to find. Since millennials on average are reaching higher educational levels, they are tech savvy. ETS thought that millennials would blow the other generations out of the water in terms of again, job aptitude. They found the opposite. Millennials scored lower on literacy, practical math, and problem solving in technology-rich environments, which is to say, education is important, but experience is needed to apply knowledge to deliver value in the workplace. So experience absolutely matters. And adding to that, a few years ago, Gartner introduced their Digital Dexterity Index, and they defined that as the cognitive ability and social practice to leverage and manipulate media, information, and technology in unique and highly innovative ways. And looking at the age groups present in the workforce, the highest score on digital dexterity went to people aged 55 to 74. So a lot of these really pervasive myths around who can understand and apply and use technology, it's actually people of all ages. Here's another good myth. I think this might be one of the more egregious of all of the generational myths. So many, webinars and blogs about the big difference with millennials being they're wanting meaning in their work, as if previous generations were coin operated. Fact is, everyone wants meaning in work. And shown on the left here, a really expansive study by Imperative found that boomers were actually the generation most likely to prioritize purpose over things like title and pay. And I think this is actually one of the more likely a life stage thing. Younger workers have student loans, new families, mortgages. So nothing wrong with a somewhat bigger focus on the paycheck. But again, meaning, purpose, that's really something that matters to everyone. And at Wright, an IBM Institute for Business Value study found very similar results. Generations don't really want different things at work. Yeah, we want to get paid, but we work harder when we feel committed and connected to what we're doing. So the next few slides are kind of fun. These are the results of a survey done in 2018 by a real estate information provider. I don't really know anything about Commercial Cafe, but it is a statistically valid survey. And they asked different generations about their preferences for the workplace. And this slide shows overall results in terms of ideal office layout. Private office comes in at number 1. it's one of those things, no matter how much we say private offices are going away, they never quite lose their grip on people in terms of what they want. But, based on what we all know about millennials, obviously, this private office number, it's got to be driven by boomers and Xers. Millennials, as I've had so many clients tell me, just want an open office and to roam free with their laptops and their backpack sitting anywhere. So what does this chart look like when it's broken down by generation? There's really no difference. Private office came as the #1 choice for each of the generations in the survey by a good margin, and equally low kind of ratings on open plan. Now, this doesn't mean there aren't diverse opinions around preferred office layouts. It just means generations are not a good marker of preference. It could be industry, region, personality type, urban or suburban. All these things are more likely to impact a chart like this than generations. This doesn't mean that we give a private office to everyone, by the way, but it does mean, we shouldn't try and sweep this issue under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist. It is something that I think we want to try to understand as we provide effective workplaces. One more on this survey, it also looked at the importance of spatial conditions in the workplace. Here we see noise and privacy on a scale of very unimportant to very important. The survey found them very much on the important side. So by stereotype, again, millennials supposedly don't care about either of these things. They'll just put on headphones. It's the boomers who must be driving these outcomes. And again, not so much. No notable differences across generations in the importance of things like privacy and noise control. The study is just a great reminder that a lot of our thought on generational differences are really just assumptions and projections of stereotype. So going into this last section, we're going to look at workplace design. So thinking about everything that we've looked at so far, our workforce is becoming much more age diverse. It's growing much older. We may go from working 40 years to working 50, 60, even 70 years. So I think the first big kind of workplace design implication of that is that this can't be what the workplace experience looks like. No one should have to face this for 1 decade of work, much less 6 decades. And as much as attention is given to the Googleplexes of the world, this is what you see on the slide is very much the prevailing workplace environment. The cube farm is very much alive and kicking. So if not this, what? In terms of designing for age diversity, I think the most important element is actually in the pre-design process. To deliver workplaces that support age diversity, we need to get the insights and experiences of age diverse groups to help shape that vision. This does not happen a lot right now. Either age is ignored or our focus is almost exclusively on younger generations. So thinking about things like surveys, it's okay, even important, to ask age and to analyze by age group. Focus groups, I can't count the number of next gen focus groups I've done, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they do need to be balanced. And I'm not saying to do an old gen focus group, but I've been balancing perspectives by doing focus groups with long tenured employees, and I found those to be enormously valuable. I'm not going to touch on all of these, but visual listening, interviews, activity analysis, journaling, just doing everything we can to ensure that we're capturing a diversity of viewpoints and experiences. I put virtual reality on here, even though it's kind of more in the design phase, but I think it's just really exciting to have the ability to simulate moving through space, seeing and experiencing it through the lens of people with different abilities. And last on here, post-occupancy evaluations. Pre-design, is when you need you make the plan for post-occupancy. It doesn't happen otherwise, and we just aren't doing enough post-occupancy evaluations. And there are a lot of bad ideas, a lot of bad workplace strategies and approaches that have stuck around because we're not going back in and seeing what's really working and what isn't. With so much attention, I think, is given to benchmarking, but we should really only ever benchmark what's working great, not the bad, not even the mediocre. I think in general, no one should care about a benchmark for square foot per person unless we know that the workplace making up that benchmark actually delivered amazing experiences and drove better results. Designing for age diversity also doesn't mean ignoring that there are physical implications to getting older. People are definitely staying healthy longer, but our bodies do change as we age. So it's really important to consider elements like lighting, providing personal control, task lighting, lots of natural light. Acoustics, as the survey showed, a big deal to all generations, but very, very important for older workers. Our world today delivers a lot of hearing damage over a lifetime. So making sure that, sound acoustic strategies are in place. Ergonomics is an obvious one, but just simple things like plugs and ports where you don't have to crawl under the table, those really do matter. Wayfinding, making it intuitive, being careful about proximity and adjacency, providing spaces for rejuvenation. And what I think is really cool about designing for diversity, for age diversity, is that it ends up in better environments for everyone. I'm not quite in the 55 plus range yet, but I care about all these things. So moving on, after all my charts, I feel like I owe you some images, a few visuals for how a workplace can support age diversity. So the future is almost certainly going to need to accommodate more flexibility around work. Of the boomers who plan to work past retirement age, 85% said they wanted some kind of non-traditional arrangement. So, we're going to likely, they're going to be used in the workplace in a slightly different way. And again, capture that in pre-design what those preferences for what they're going to do while they're at work are. But spaces like this, with unassigned desks for people to use while, if they're coming into the office to collaborate, to sit down and do a little bit of focus work, we're going to see a lot more of these, and they just make a lot of sense. Connection is also really going to be key. That's one of the big drivers for mature workers wanting to continue to work is and really what we found about all age groups right now have missed during COVID, is connection. So what you see here is an airy, welcoming space. It's filled with natural light. You see multiple seating options at the bar. You see tables, booths, couches, benches. Space where you can work or socialize. You see task lighting at the booth, coffee and food to draw people in. Again, making kind of those unplanned interactions more probable. A nice mix of materiality, of color and pattern. And a really critical element here is multiple sight lines. We communicate less with people we see less. So in the workplace, that's what we call the Allen curve. There's a strong negative correlation between physical distance and the frequency of communication. So the more often we see someone, even at a distance, the more likely that in the future we'll communicate with them. So, you may be sitting up on that mezzanine level and you see Jana from marketing, down below and think, hey, I should ask her about that new product. So really, encouraging that with multiple sight lines is an important aspect. One other thing on this, and it's not related to age diversity, it's just, I think, sorry, again, I've gotten trigger happy. I think it's just an interesting idea. You see that there's a reception desk in the background or the midground of this photo. So this space here is actually meant for both employees and visitors and, customers and clients. I think it's an interesting idea of companies putting their best foot forward for both. Learning at work is going to be an incredibly big thing. Workplaces are reimagining themselves as places for learning and growth. Part of it is, of course, that talent war that we've talked about. People with the necessary mix of skills for any given job are getting increasingly hard to find. So many companies are really starting to hire for aptitude and then taking it on themselves to train people with the skills they need. So it's kind of a grow your own talent approach. And as I mentioned earlier, with automation so rapidly changing work, the World Economic Forum predicts that even now about 52% of workers will require reskilling or upskilling in the immediate future. So, as we think about our careers expanding to 5 or 6 decades, needing to reskill at some point seems very likely. So spaces like this one shown here, the training room, they're going to be important. But there's also, it'll be important passive learning as well. So much of how we learn at work is through osmosis, through just being around and listening to and observing our coworkers. So, more spaces and tools to ideate, making work visible, that transparency and visual connection, more and more varied opportunities to collaborate and not to forget quiet spaces too are going to be critical as we imagine our workplaces as places of learning. Well-being, already growing in relevance before COVID, that's only going to increase as our workforce ages. And remember that diagram I mentioned earlier showing the increase in jobs that don't involve physical exertion. The chart here is on that exact same timeline and shows the average adult weight for men and women. They increased nearly in lockstep with that decrease in physical activities. It's nearly a perfect overlay. So, work becoming sedentary has not done great things for our bodies. And the World Health Organization has actually pinpointed the workplace as one of the key battlegrounds for, to fight for well-being, since we spend so much time in offices. So, keeping in mind in terms of design, daylight, views to nature, connection to outdoors, ventilation, plants, greenery, access to healthy food, opportunities for activity, movement, those are all going to be focal points moving forward. And providing, I think of it as a way space, spaces in the workplace to get away from your workstation. And as I shown, in this image, a place you could work, you could socialize here, you could have an informal meeting, you could just sit on that couch and close your eyes. So really, we'll see an increase in spaces that have more of a residential feel, inviting furniture. You see a fireplace here, daylight, somewhat tucked away off traffic routes. There's just enormous value in these spaces. They really offer this kind of no pressure zone to interact. And again, social connection that's so critical to people of all ages. Countless studies showing that socializing at work delivers better results. So, spaces like this encourage that in a really kind of an unforced way. And, in this age kind of diverse workplace, you do have to support focus work, and that can be done in a number of different ways. Spaces like this shown, they always get heavy use, but also things like focus rooms or reservable private offices. I think that one of the more problematic conversations going on right now is this idea that after COVID, the workplace will just be a place to interact and collaborate. We've tried to make the office only about collaboration so many times over the last few decades, and it never turns out well. People want and expect to be able to do focus at work, so I think it's really important to accommodate that. And I think there could be an entire presentation on the ways technology can be leveraged to support age diversity. Today it's almost impossible to separate workplace experience from technology. We just switch between virtual and physical realms so often, no matter where we're working. So I think in the next couple of years, there'll be very few organizations that don't have a workplace app using it to really deliver a superior experience at work, whether it's, you have the ability to reserve a parking spot, a workstation, you can use the app to find out where people in your team are. We'll also see a rise in terms of use of extended reality and virtual environments. My firm is doing some really great work on this front. You're going to see elements like a virtual concierge, again, really owning that opportunity to curate the workplace experience. Digital displays, they're already in such great use, but using them to communicate and engage, but also digital displays, they just allow really quick and easy change to the environment to keep people engaged with it, offering something different with no cost, different colors, images, messaging every day. So, everything I've shared so far is I've tried to ground it in research to put a data point alongside it. But, this is one slide where I'm just going to allow myself a little bit to editorialize. The workplace, it's an immersive experience. From the minute we enter it, it's communicating with us, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. It's telling us about the company's culture, how it works, what it values. And I understand the kind of the motivation behind the type of aesthetic you see here. I actually hear it a lot. We want to keep our startup mentality. We want to be edgy, gritty, authentic, anti-corporate. But environments like this, they do send a youth-centric message. I think we all kind of know the target demographic of these environments that they're trying to appeal to. Not that there aren't 70-somethings who might like this, but I have found anecdotally in visual listening exercises with older workers that they don't seem to gravitate to these images. So with a talented design team, I think there really is ample opportunity through aesthetics and space types and adjacencies and furniture selection to really send a message that all ages are valued and welcome. And it doesn't mean the space is going to be blah. I think really quite the opposite. I think it'll be something really compelling that everyone appreciates. So, I've thrown a lot at you. I hope there's some things in here that have been new or at least interesting. I think this is a really exciting moment in no small part because there are so many firsts happening with the workforce. This is uncharted territory. We haven't been here before, and I think it's a really important topic. I don't think we can really afford to ignore, nor would we, I think, want to, because there really is so much to gain by embracing age diversity at work. But before I end, just a few parting thoughts. When I started researching this topic, I wasn't finding much thinking around age diversity in the workforce, particularly in the United States. What there was coming from abroad, but that is changing. My Google alerts have started getting a trickle of new reports and articles on the topic, and the latest census stats have really further brought this into the spotlight, that our demographics are changing. So I'm certainly hoping this means that awareness will continue to grow, and that we'll have that focus on all generations, not just the ones coming into the workforce. I also think it's really interesting to just think in a broad sense about kind of the patterns of our lives. What's shown here is kind of the 20th century model that has existed for a very long time, and has been really pretty consistent across most people, that our life has three parts. We learn up to a certain age, we work, we retire. There are exceptions, but this is overwhelmingly the life pattern that most people have followed. You educate, you in terms of your professional life, that life model has then led to this kind of work model. Most people commute 27 minutes to an office building. They work in a workstation or a private office for 8.8 hours. But what happens when you look at this kind of life model? What happens when our lives do on average hit 100? Does a 32-year retirement make sense? Is it even viable? Is it desirable? Projections, again, that our health and well-being will continue to increase, along with our lifespan. So an 85-year-old, will likely have the physical capabilities of someone decades younger. So a lot of people are considering is there a different life model that we need to be thinking about, unlike this one? So thinking about that more of a 100-year life model, is there a possibility for more of a kind of a build your own journey approach, with more choices, that you certainly do go through a period of time learning, but do we emphasize being an intern for a period of time, some work? Do you go back to school and re-educate on a completely different topic at some point in your life, go through that intern and work phase again? But then is there a moment, to travel? Like, does that become an option that happens, long before retirement? You come back, maybe you do some gig work, you do some volunteer work, you learn again, that lead up to retirement. So, just a very different take, one that allows, again, more change, and again, thinking 100 years is a very long time. So if that's kind of a possibility, what does that mean for this kind of conventional work paradigm that we've developed? It seems like it would change. I don't know that anyone has the answer right now to how, but I think it's definitely, again, with all this happening, it's the right time to start thinking about it. It's like, can we really shake up our conventional models about how we work in the places that we work in? And lastly, this is my last slide. Just a reminder that, again, I think there's more attention being given to kind of the age diversity in the workplace, but there is there's a shiny new object entering the scene, and I will say it doesn't seem like Gen Z is getting quite the millennial frenzy that we saw, but I'm seeing a lot popping up around them, around Gen Z. And again, there's nothing wrong with getting excited about a new generation entering the workforce, so long as, again, we don't lose sight of all these things that are happening on the other end of the age spectrum as well. So I want to thank you so much for your time today. Please feel free to reach out to me. I got some contact information up here. This topic it's become really important to me. If you have an audience you think might benefit from it, please let me know. My LinkedIn, email info are listed. And now I think we have a few minutes if there are any questions or comments.
Great, thank you. And just a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question for Erik, please feel free to type them into your question box on your control panel, and I will be happy to present them over to him. Give you another minute to type in, see if anything comes in. Erik, I have a question. When you're designing the workspace and you say how focus areas are very important, is there a certain ratio that you need for person to focus area?
It really does vary by work process, workflow, and so that's one of the things that we explore deeply in terms of those pre-design engagements, is to understand how does work happen in this organization. What is that mix of focus work? And one of the things that I think we're guilty of is like we kind of lump all focus work together. There's actually a huge variety of different types of focus, just like there are many different types of collaboration. So understanding, is it light focus? Is it deep, rich, concentrative focus? Understanding those preferences, because they vary so greatly. Some people really do need full visual and acoustic isolation in order to deeply concentrate. Some people prefer to work in a place where there's a slight buzz going on, a coffee shop environment. And so understanding the different preferences, understanding the flow of work patterns, I mean, they help us kind of reach what that ratio of kind of focused space needs to be in terms of providing that effective workplace.
Great, thank you. Someone's asking, how important do you think office cleaning will be moving forward now that so much focus has been put on cleaning and disinfecting?
I think it is gonna be an important aspect moving forward. I mean, one of the things that we always try and figure out is like what's going to stick around. It's certainly an enormous focus right now. Even as we discovered that kind of transfer, contact transfer of COVID wasn't as big a deal as through the air. We still continue to emphasize that because it felt like something that we could do to address the epidemic. And so I think I've heard it called performative cleaning, where it's like we know it's not really necessarily doing much, but people like to see it. I think that will continue on to some extent. But again, I think we have to, there's a lot of predictions, unfortunately, that this is not the last pandemic that we're going to be facing, that we may be entering a new era of pandemics. And so, as we understand the workplace with the materiality, the cleanability, all those elements are going to be really important, I think, as we think about the future workplace, especially as we explore some of these, if and I'm using the word hybrid now, if there is hybrid work that will likely result in more sharing of spaces when people are at work. And so it's going to be an important concern to address. And overall, I think it's not a bad one. I think, I look back at how we would, during flu season, we were all a little careful, but it didn't change all that much. It's like now I wonder if we're going to get more attuned to all those kind of the possibilities of transfer of disease and get a lot more careful about it, which I think overall would be not a bad thing. So it's going to be all health and well-being elements across that spectrum are going to be critical.
Thank you. On the surveys that break out the office environment that each generation prefers, do you know what the breakouts were for preferring home office?
I do have that. I don't have. I have them. I don't know them by heart. There were a number, and granted, and keep in mind that was a 2018. So it's like these are. I think that any survey is at best kind of a directional sense, and recognizing that they're always a moment in time. They do shift, but I think it'd be safe to say, right now in this current time, we're seeing a lot of people obviously seeing advantages. For some people having experience working from home, that there's that we're seeing a huge desire to continue to do so.
Thank you. When it comes to unassigned desks, how important is it offering some sort of personal storage?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's one that I think that there's some degree of necessity. I don't believe in a lot of empty desks and wasted space. So I think that unassigned is certainly an aspect of that. Shared desking, there is inherently a preference for people to come in and own a space, to be able to personalize it, be able to store their stuff at a desk, to know that they can rely on that. That is something that we know from surveys people prefer. If you had to choose between unassigned or having something that's assigned to you, people will choose assigned to you. In either case, it's like I think that some accommodation of storage is absolutely critical. What we want to do, as much as we possibly can, is to make that coming into work a seamless experience. If people are worrying about where they're going to put their stuff, whether that's a locker at another location, whether it's a temporary thing at the desk, if it's a shared desk, again, if it's assigned seating, that accommodation of recognizing people are not robots. They have stuff, they bring stuff with them, they want to be able to put it somewhere. I think we forget that sometimes in some of those beautiful, clean images of a workplace. That's not typically how it plays out. And so trying to, again, accommodate that need, I think is really important. That's a great question.
Thank you. We'll give it just another moment to see if any other questions come through. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. We have a couple minutes left. How would you approach scheduling shared hoteling areas?
It is, again, I don't want to cop out on the question. To me, it does, again, have a lot to do with workflow and work cadence. It's interesting to see all the approaches that organizations are using right now. I have one client, they are assigning people different teams, different days that they come in. They're letting other teams know when those teams are in, so that people have the option to come if they need to work with that team. They're making sure that leadership is scheduled for certain days, so these teams have access to leadership. So there's that model. Some team, within teams, people, again, wanting to make sure that they have that opportunity to see each other and to interact and be together. And so kind of owning a certain section of unassigned hoteling at a certain time for a certain team, through to, some organizations are really kind of fully opening it up and really experimenting to see what that need is. You do see patterns emerge over time. Monday morning, Friday afternoon, not so, if you kind of fully open it up, you're not going to see a lot of people in those hoteling stations. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, there's some peak times, which is kind of works against your real estate strategy. You want to kind of level out that use. And so, what's interesting right now is I feel like we're in this moment of great experimentation. So I don't know that everyone, the solution is there yet, but what is interesting is that organizations are really getting more intentional about tracking that so that they can learn and adapt the work environment as they see what are those patterns. Do they need to interrupt those patterns? It's data driven, but it's also, trying to understand the experience as well from the end user point. So it's a really interesting moment. But I think, overall, again, there's some positive elements that are going to come out of it.
Excellent, very good. Okay, on that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Erik, I want to thank you for a great presentation. I just want to remind everyone, his contact information is on the screen right now, and a recording of this presentation will be on the CFC website, ifmacfc.org. Usually, Larry gets it up within 48 hours, so it's up pretty fast. So definitely go there, and if you want to share it out, I'd encourage you to do that as well. And Erik, thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks very much. Appreciate your time.